Hello, class, and welcome back to Lesson 7. This is Part 3, the relationship between sound and image. And here in our first slide, we are still from Apocalypse Now. We mentioned this in the last lecture when we talked about its prominent use of voiceover narration. It's also famous for its sound effects and its music, the way that Coppola uses music in this famous scene when the helicopters attack the Vietnam village is particularly notable. It's one of the more famous scenes in the history of movies, and if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Okay, so in part 1 of this lesson, we looked at the history of sound. In part 2, we talked about the components of film sound. And now in this brief lecture, we're going to look at some principles of sound design. The complexity of modern film sound and its increasing artistic importance in the design of the film has over time required a new creative member of the production team, the sound designer. Sound designers create a total sound environment for the film's images, an environment that not only supports the images, but also extends their meaning. In other words, sound becomes an artistic expression in its own right. Sound and image. Sound can actively shape how we perceive and interpret images. We know this, right? They can also direct our attentions quite specifically within an image. Sound cues can anticipate images such as footsteps or a creaking door in a horror film. Sound also gives value to silence. For example, a quiet passage can create almost unbearable tension. Look at the horror film A Quiet Place, for example, to see how silence is used, particularly the lack of dialogue, to create a lot of tension. We can actually say that sound bristles with as many creative possibilities as editing does. So through editing, one may join shots together of any two spaces to create a meaningful relation. And we know that those shots can be combined virtually in infinite ways. Similar to that, the filmmaker can mix any sonic phenomena into a whole. We talked about in the last lecture how films can have up to 200 tracks of sound being mixed together simultaneously. That's a lot of possibilities. So with the introduction of sound cinema, the infinity of visual possibilities was joined by the infinity of acoustic events, which is awesome because it gives us so many opportunities to create art the way that we want to, but also a little bit daunting because we have to make specific choices as artists, right? We have to narrow down those possibilities and choose one. So as they construct the soundtrack, filmmakers, sound designers must consider what audiences will hear at any given time and what sounds will get the most emphasis. So this is where we get sound mixing. Because dialogue conveys so much information, speech gets the most emphasis. Rarely do sound effects or music overwhelm dialogue unless it has a specific narrative purpose. Obviously, otherwise, the dialogue wouldn't be able to push the story forward if we couldn't hear it. There would be no purpose for it. So dialogue is often, if not usually, mixed so that it takes precedence on the soundtrack over these other elements. Sound and screen space. Sound is a powerful tool for helping filmmakers create the illusion that the world of the story extends beyond the boundaries of the frame. Sound often points to action that happens off screen, details that are unseen, but which are important factors shaping the storyline. An example might be a gunshot, characters hear from another room. So it's just another way, like off-screen space for cinematography, that the world can be implied beyond what we're seeing and hearing to give an idea of a larger space, of a larger environment. Sometimes filmmakers don't want to amplify what we see. Sometimes they want to contrast what we see with sounds or music. So while typically the soundtrack will correspond to the action, accentuate the mood evoked by the visuals, sometimes filmmakers will pair an image with a sound that seems wildly inappropriate, producing a tension between the aural and the visual info. And so an example might be in a horror movie, again, a child speaking with the voice of a demon, right? That's a very unexpected sound. We don't expect to hear that, and it creates a very particular emotional mood. And then finally, combining sound and image allows filmmakers to present two different points in time simultaneously. As when a voiceover narration describes past events, right? Or say when a character is remembering somebody talking to them from the past. So I want you to go to the course site and watch this video, which is an analysis of sound design in Steven Spielberg's Munich. And it kind of sums up and incorporates all these different elements of sound design that we've discussed in this lecture, and shows how Spielberg and his collaborators create sound design for the sequence under analysis. And that is the end of Lecture 7. So make sure that you watch all the clips, do your reading, watch the movie Hustlers here, and then do your assignments, and then move on to the final assignment in this class, which will be your final paper.